The first sign something was wrong came at our engagement party 15 years ago, when Marta laughed a little too hard at her own joke about marrying me for money. "Of course I'm marrying him for the money," she'd announced to the crowded room, champagne flute raised high, her designer dress sparkling under the country club's crystal chandeliers. I should have seen the warning signs then. Instead, I'd grinned and fired back, "Good thing we signed that prenup this morning, right, sweetheart? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." The room went dead silent. Marta's parents, Dolores and Frank, went pale as their expensive tablecloth. Her mother's fork clattered against her plate, and I swear I heard someone's champagne glass hit the floor. Marta's smile froze like she'd been slapped. But that was 15 years ago, and I was young and stupid enough to think I was being clever. Now, at 44, I'm Alex Holden, finance director at Morrison & Associates, one of Chicago's premier advertising agencies. I drive a sensible BMW, live in a 4-bedroom colonial in Winnetka, and have exactly the kind of life everyone thinks they want. My wife Marta is the agency's creative director, stunning at 43, with honey blonde hair and the kind of smile that makes clients sign million-dollar contracts. Perfect life, right? Wrong. The cracks started showing about 6 months ago. Marta began working late, really late. She'd come home after midnight smelling like expensive cologne that wasn't mine, claiming she'd been brainstorming with the team. Her phone became surgically attached to her hand, buzzing with messages she'd read with secretive little smiles. "Who's texting you at 11 p.m.? I'd ask. "Just work stuff, honey. You know how creative types are. We get inspired at weird hours." Creative types? Right. The only thing getting inspired was my suspicion. Then came the whispers at the office. I'd walk into the break room and conversations would stop. Colleagues would give me those pitying looks usually reserved for people with terminal illnesses or bad haircuts. My friend Raj, our IT manager, started avoiding eye contact altogether. The gossip mill in advertising agencies makes small-town newspapers look discreet. Everyone knows everyone's business, and apparently everyone knew mine before I did. Marta's got 2 men. I overheard Tanya from accounting tell Liz from HR. Her husband and her real man. Her real man. The phrase hit me like a punch to the gut. Last Tuesday, while Marta showered, I found a hotel receipt in her purse. The Fairmont, downtown, room service for 2, champagne, chocolate-covered strawberries, the works. Addressed to J plus M, I hoped J stood for just a friend. Fat chance. That's when Raj finally broke down and told me what he'd been dying to say for weeks. "Bro," he said, pulling me aside after a particularly awkward team meeting. "You need to check your wife's Instagram stories. She posted from some 5-star suite yesterday, talking about her business trip." "You're not in any of the pictures, man." I checked. There was Marta, glowing and gorgeous, champagne flute in hand, standing in front of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. The caption read, "Working hard with my favorite colleague. Shall blessed fiarm teamwork zone inspiration." Her favorite colleague? Jake Turnbull, 28, junior creative director, and apparently the J in J plus M. 6'2", model handsome, drives a leased BMW he can't afford, and has the kind of cocky smile that makes you want to punch it off his face. In the photo, Jake's reflection was clearly visible in the window behind Marta, shirtless, holding 2 champagne glasses. That night, I confronted her. "How was your business trip, honey?" "Exhausting," she said, not looking up from her phone. "But productive. We came up with some great ideas for the Morrison campaign." "Must have been inspiring, working so closely with Jake." Her fingers stopped typing. For just a moment, I saw panic flash across her face. Then she recovered, smooth as silk. "Jake's very talented. He brings fresh perspectives to our campaigns." "I bet he does. Fresh perspectives on hotel room service, maybe?" "What's that supposed to mean?" I pulled out my phone, showed her the Instagram story. "This mean anything to you?" Marta's face went through several expressions, surprise, anger, calculation, before settling on indignant innocence. "Alex, you're being paranoid. We were working. Yes, we had champagne. Yes, we celebrated when we cracked the Morrison brief. That's what colleagues do." "Shirtless colleagues?" He spilled wine on his shirt. "God, Alex, do you hear yourself? You sound crazy." Crazy. The word every cheating spouse uses when they're caught. I wasn't crazy, I was just finally paying attention. The next morning, while Marta showered, I did something I'd never done in 15 years of marriage. I invaded her privacy. Her laptop was open on the kitchen counter, logged into her email. Her password was embarrassingly easy to guess. Jake 2024. What I found made my stomach turn. A group chat called Girls' Night Out, with Tanya, Liz, and 3 other women from the agency. Months of messages about Marta's affair, complete with explicit details I never needed to know about my wife's intimate life with another man. Jake is amazing in bed. Finally, a real man who knows what he's doing. Does Alex suspect anything? Please. He's so buried in spreadsheets, he wouldn't notice if I brought Jake home for dinner. You're terrible. But seriously, how long are you going to keep this up? Until I figure out how to divorce him without losing everything. That prenup is ironclad, but there might be ways around it. The messages went back 4 months. 4 months of planning, scheming, and laughing at the stupid husband who didn't have a clue. But wait, there was more. I found Jake's contact info and did some digging. Turns out Mr. Wonderful was broke. 3 months behind on his BMW payments, maxed out credit cards, and living in a studio apartment in a building that had seen better decades. My wife was cheating on me with a fraud who couldn't afford his own lifestyle. That evening, I followed Jake to Murphy's Pub on Clark Street. He was there with Seth, another junior executive, bragging about his conquest over beer and wings. She says her husband's some boring accountant type, Jake laughed, loud enough for half the bar to hear. Guy makes decent money, but has zero imagination. She's practically begging me to show her what she's been missing. Dude, you're playing with fire. What if he finds out? What's he going to do? Bore me to death with a PowerPoint presentation? I recorded every word on my phone. The next morning, I implemented what I now call Operation Reality Check. I forwarded the group chat screenshots and Jake's bar recording to some very interested parties. Dave Millant, our CEO, Dolores, Marta's money-obsessed mother, and half the office, including HR. The response was immediate and beautiful. My phone started ringing at 8 a.m. First, Dave Millant. Alex, we need to talk. Can you come in early? Then Dolores, Marta's mother, her voice dripping with ice. Alexander, I think we should have lunch today. There are some things about my daughter I need to discuss with you. By 9 a.m., the office was buzzing. Marta walked in to find her computer access suspended and a meeting request from HR. Jake found his BMW in the parking lot with Homewrecker keyed into the paint. I watched it all unfold from my office, sipping coffee and feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Satisfaction. At noon, Marta stormed into my office, her face flushed with rage and humiliation. How could you? She hissed, slamming the door behind her. You violated my privacy. You sent private messages to my mother. Private messages about our marriage, I replied calmly. I thought she should know what kind of daughter she raised. You bastard, you've ruined everything. No, sweetheart, you ruined everything. I just made sure everyone knew about it. She grabbed my coffee mug and hurled it at the wall, where it shattered, leaving a brown stain on my diploma. You think you're so smart? You have no idea what you've started. Actually, I think I'm finishing something you started 4 months ago. That afternoon, I cornered Jake in the parking lot. He was examining his keyed BMW, his face red with anger. Nice car, I said. Shame about the paint job. He spun around, fists clenched. You did this. Me? I've been in meetings all morning. Must have been someone who doesn't appreciate homewreckers. Jake stepped closer, trying to intimidate me with his height and youth. You think you can destroy my career over some jealous paranoia? Jealous? I laughed. Jake, I wouldn't be jealous of you if you were the last man on earth. You're a broke loser pretending to be successful while sleeping with another man's wife. That's not enviable. That's pathetic. Before he could respond, I slapped him. Not hard, not violently, just a sharp, dismissive slap that echoed across the parking lot. A few coworkers had gathered to watch the show, and I heard someone gasp. That's for thinking I'm too boring to fight back, I said loud enough for everyone to hear. Touch my wife again, and next time it won't be just a slap. Jake stood there, holding his cheek, humiliated in front of our colleagues. His tough guy act crumbled like cheap drywall. This isn't over, he muttered. You're right, I said. It's just getting started. That evening, my lawyer friend Tom called with urgent news. Alex, you need to get to the bank. Marta's been moving money out of your joint accounts all day. I beat Marta to the bank by 15 minutes. Thanks to that prenup she'd forgotten about, I was able to freeze the joint accounts and secure our assets before she could drain them. When she arrived with Jake in tow, looking frantic and desperate, the bank manager informed her that account access required both signatures for any withdrawals over $500. The look on her face was priceless. You can't do this, she screamed in the bank lobby, causing other customers to stare. That's my money too. Actually, I said, pulling out a copy of our prenuptial agreement, according to this document you signed 15 years ago, the house, cars, and investment accounts remain separate property. The joint checking account has exactly $1,200 in it. You're welcome to half. Jake tried to look tough. stepping forward like he was going to defend his woman's honor. "This is harassment, man. You can't just... I can't just what? Protect my assets from theft. Because that's what this is, Jake. My wife and her broke boyfriend trying to steal money to fund their little love affair." The bank manager, clearly uncomfortable with the domestic drama unfolding in his lobby, suggested we take our discussion elsewhere. That weekend, I went nuclear. The annual Chicago Advertising Awards Gala was the industry's biggest social event. Everyone who mattered would be there, including Marta and Jake, who probably thought they could brazen it out together in public. They thought wrong. I arrived early, schmoozing with colleagues and clients, playing the role of the dignified husband whose marriage was having some difficulties. When Marta and Jake made their entrance, her in a stunning red dress, him in a tuxedo he'd probably rented, I was ready. During the cocktail hour, I approached the microphone set up for the evening's presentations. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, tapping the microphone. "I'd like to make a toast to my beautiful wife, Marta, and her very close colleague, Jake Turnbull." The room quieted. Marta's face went white. Jake looked like he wanted to run. "To Marta," I continued, "who taught me that marriage is about sharing everything. Your hopes, your dreams, your hotel receipts from the Fairmont." I pulled out my phone. In fact, she's been so generous with sharing, I thought I'd share some of her recent text messages with all of you. I began reading selected excerpts from the group chat, the juicy ones about Jake being amazing in bed and me being a boring accountant type. The room was dead silent except for a few gasps and nervous laughs. Marta tried to rush the microphone, but Jake held her back, probably realizing that making a scene would only make things worse. "And let's not forget Jake's contribution to this beautiful relationship," I continued, playing the audio from Murphy's Pub on the sound system. His voice filled the ballroom, bragging about sleeping with another man's wife and calling me boring. By the time I finished, half the room was recording on their phones. Marta's mother, Dolores, had gone pale and was clutching her chest dramatically. Jake looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "So here's to love," I concluded, raising my champagne glass. "May it always find a way, even if it has to sneak around hotel rooms and lie to everyone it claims to care about." I drained my glass and walked off the stage to stunned silence, followed by an explosion of whispers and excited chatter. Marta and Jake fled before the main course was served. The next morning, the gossip had spread throughout the entire Chicago advertising community. Marta's phone was blowing up with calls from former friends, most of them cutting ties. Jake's social media was flooded with comments calling him a homewrecker and a fraud. But I wasn't done. That Tuesday, Jake cornered me at my gym, apparently thinking he could intimidate me on neutral ground. "You destroyed my career, you psycho," he snarled, following me into the locker room. "I've got nothing left to lose." "Good," I replied, continuing to change out of my workout clothes. "Now you're finally being honest about who you are." He grabbed my shoulder, spinning me around. "I'm not done with you." "Actually, you are." I'd been planning this moment for days. The gym's locker room had security cameras, but there was one blind spot near the back wall. I led Jake there, pretending to be intimidated by his threats. When he cornered me, I was ready. I'd loosened the lock on one of the storage lockers earlier, and when Jake pushed me against it, the door swung open. I shoved him inside and slammed it shut, clicking the lock into place. "Let me out," he shouted, pounding on the metal door. "Sure," I said, "right after I finish my workout. Should be about an hour." I left him there, naked and trapped, while I completed a leisurely session on the treadmill. When I finally let him out, the locker room was full of other gym members getting ready for the evening rush. Jake emerged, red-faced and furious, wearing nothing but a towel he'd found in the locker. The other men stared in confusion and amusement as he tried to explain why he'd been locked in a storage compartment. I filmed the whole thing on my phone. "Gentlemen," I announced to the room, "meet Jake Turnbull, homewrecker and part-time storage unit occupant. Jake, say hello to your new neighbors." The video went viral in our social circle within hours. Jake's humiliation was just the beginning. While he was dealing with his newfound fame as Locker Room Jake, I was systematically dismantling his entire fake lifestyle. A little research revealed that Jake was 3 months behind on his BMW payments and had lied on his lease application about his income. One anonymous tip to the repo company and his landlord later, and Jake's carefully constructed image began crumbling like a house of cards. I watched from across the street as the repo men loaded his BMW onto a flatbed truck. Jake came running out of his building in his underwear, shouting and pleading, but the paperwork was ironclad. 3 months of missed payments meant goodbye, fancy car. His apartment was next. I'd discovered that Jake had listed his income as $85,000 on his lease application, when he actually made $52,000. That's fraud, and landlords don't appreciate being lied to. A mysterious water pipe burst in the apartment above his, flooding his studio and ruining most of his belongings. The landlord, already suspicious about the income discrepancy, decided not to renew Jake's lease. Within a week, Jake was homeless, carless, and desperate. That's when he made his biggest mistake. I was working late at the office, finishing up some quarterly reports, when Jake appeared in my doorway. He looked terrible, unshaven, wearing the same clothes from 2 days ago, his cocky smile replaced by desperate anger. "You think you're so smart," he said, stepping into my office and closing the door behind him. "You think you've won." "I don't think I've won, Jake. I know I have." He pulled out a baseball bat he'd been hiding behind his back. "Maybe it's time someone taught you a lesson about respect." I stayed calm, my hand moving slowly toward the panic button under my desk. "What are you going to do, Jake? Beat me up in my own office? There are security cameras everywhere. I don't care anymore. You destroyed my life. Now I'm going to destroy you." He raised the bat, but before he could swing, I hit the panic button. Within seconds, security alarms were blaring throughout the building. "You bastard!" Jake screamed, but the sound of running footsteps in the hallway made him freeze. Building security burst through the door, followed by Dave Millant and 2 other executives who'd been working late. "What the hell is going on here?" Dave demanded. Jake stood there, bat in hand, looking like exactly what he was, a desperate man who just threatened violence in a corporate office. "Jake was just leaving," I said calmly. "Weren't you, Jake?" Security escorted him out, but not before I'd gotten everything on video with my phone. Jake Turnbull, former junior creative director, threatening his colleague with a baseball bat. Career suicide in high definition. The video made its way to every advertising agency in Chicago by morning. Jake Turnbull was now officially unemployed and employable. But Marta was still fighting. She'd moved in with her mother after I changed the locks on our house, and Dolores was not happy about her daughter's choices. The woman who'd always treated me like I wasn't good enough for her precious daughter was now forced to confront the reality of what that precious daughter had become. "She's been calling me nonstop," Dolores told me when she invited me to lunch at the country club, begging for money, making excuses, blaming you for everything. "What do you think, Dolores?" The older woman sighed, looking every one of her 72 years. "I think my daughter is a fool who threw away a good marriage for a man who can't even afford his own car." "The prenup stands," I reminded her. "She gets nothing from me." "Good. Maybe poverty will teach her what I apparently failed to." That evening, Marta showed up at my house, using her old key before realizing I'd changed the locks. I found her on the front porch, crying and looking more vulnerable than I'd seen her in years. "Alex, please, we need to talk." Against my better judgment, I let her in. "I made a mistake," she said, sitting on our old couch like she still belonged there. "A terrible mistake. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work things out." "Work what out, Marta? The fact that you cheated on me for 4 months? The fact that you and your friends laughed at me behind my back? The fact that you tried to steal our money to run away with your boyfriend?" Jake meant nothing to me. It was just a midlife crisis, a moment of weakness. 4 months is not a moment, Marta. It's a choice you made every single day. She tried a different approach, moving closer, putting her hand on my arm. "Remember how good we used to be together? Remember our wedding day, our honeymoon in Tuscany?" "I remember. I also remember you joking about marrying me for money at our engagement party." Her face crumpled. "That was just a joke. You know I loved you." Loved. Past tense. Very telling. She stayed for an hour, cycling through anger, tears, seduction, and threats. Nothing worked. When she finally left, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The next morning, Jake made one final desperate play. Jake's final gambit was as pathetic as it was predictable. Having lost his job, his car, his apartment, and his reputation, he decided to try blackmail. He called me at work, his voice shaky with desperation. "I've got photos, Alex. Photos of you following me, recording me, setting me up. I'll go to the police, tell them you've been stalking and harassing me." Interesting theory, Jake. There's just one problem. "What's that?" "Everything I did was legal. Following someone in public places? Legal. Recording conversations in public spaces? Legal. Reporting accurate information to your creditors and landlord? Legal. You, on the other hand, threatened me with a baseball bat in my office. That's assault with a deadly weapon." The line went quiet. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to disappear from my life, from Marta's life, and from Chicago if you're smart. Because if I see you again, if you contact my wife again, if you so much as drive past my house, I'll make sure that security footage from my office ends up in the hands of every prosecutor in Cook County. You can't. I can, and I will. Test me." He hung up. 2 days later, Seth told me Jake had moved back to Wisconsin to live with his parents. Problem solved. But Marta wasn't giving up so easily. She'd been staying with her mother, but Dolores had apparently reached her limit. The woman who'd once doted on her daughter was now treating her like a shameful burden. "She kicked me out," Marta told me when she called, crying. "My own mother kicked me out because of what you did to my reputation." "What I did? Marta, I didn't make you cheat. I didn't make you lie. I didn't make you try to steal our money. I just made sure people knew the truth about what you'd already done. I have nowhere to go, Alex. I'm staying in a motel. That's not my problem anymore. I'm your wife. You're my soon-to-be ex-wife. The divorce papers were filed yesterday." The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Thanks to the prenup and the evidence of her infidelity, Marta got exactly what she'd brought into the marriage. Nothing. She tried to fight it, hiring an expensive lawyer with money she didn't have, but the evidence was overwhelming. The group chat messages, the hotel receipts, Jake's recorded confessions, it all painted a picture of a woman who'd systematically betrayed her marriage while planning to defraud her husband. The final hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in October. I represented myself, having studied family law for months in preparation. Marta sat at the plaintiff's table with her lawyer, looking desperate and defeated. When the judge asked if I had any final statements, I stood up and delivered the speech I'd been preparing for weeks. "Your Honor, I married Marta 15 years ago because I thought I'd found my partner for life. Someone who would stand by me through good times and bad. Someone who would honor the vows we made in front of God and our families." I pulled out a copy of our wedding photos, showing them to the court. Instead, I discovered that I'd married someone who saw our marriage as a business arrangement, someone who laughed about marrying me for money, who cheated on me for months while planning to steal our assets, who showed such contempt for our relationship that she bragged about it to her friends. Marta was crying now, but I wasn't finished. The evidence shows that my wife committed adultery, attempted financial fraud, and conspired with her lover to deceive me about the true nature of our marriage. The prenuptial agreement we both signed protects both parties from exactly this kind of betrayal. I asked the court to enforce that agreement and grant me a divorce with prejudice. The judge reviewed the evidence for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, she looked up. "Mrs. Holden, do you have any response to these allegations?" Marta's lawyer whispered something to her, but she shook her head and stood up on her own. "I made mistakes," she said, her voice barely audible. "But I never stopped loving my husband." "Your Honor," I interjected, "I'd like to play one more piece of evidence." I pulled out my phone and played the recording from Murphy's Pub, where Jake bragged about sleeping with my wife and called me a boring accountant. Then I played a more recent recording from just last week when Marta had called me drunk and left a voicemail. Her voice filled the courtroom. "Alex, you bastard, you think you've won? You think destroying Jake and humiliating me makes you some kind of hero? You're still the same boring, pathetic man I married. The only difference is now everyone knows it." The judge's expression hardened. "Mrs. Holden, I've heard enough. The prenuptial agreement is valid and enforceable. The divorce is granted with prejudice. Mr. Holden retains all separate property as outlined in the prenuptial agreement. Mrs. Holden, you are awarded no alimony and no portion of the marital estate. This court finds that your actions constituted a material breach of the marriage contract." Marta collapsed in her chair, sobbing. Her lawyer looked embarrassed. I felt nothing but relief. Outside the courthouse, Marta's few remaining friends had gathered, probably hoping for some dramatic reconciliation scene. Instead, they witnessed her final humiliation as she begged me for money to pay her lawyer. "I have nothing, Alex. Nothing. How am I supposed to live?" "The same way Jake is living," I replied. "Figure it out." That should have been the end of it. But Marta and Jake had one more card to play. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, on a stormy Thursday night in November, they came for me. I was in my study, reviewing some contracts for work, when I heard the sound of breaking glass from the kitchen. My security system should have triggered, but the control panel was dark. Someone had cut the power. I grabbed my phone and called 911, whispering my address to the dispatcher, then crept toward the kitchen to see what was happening. Marta and Jake were inside, both of them soaking wet from the rain, searching through drawers and cabinets with flashlights. "Where does he keep the important papers?" Marta hissed. "Try the study," Jake replied, "and look for cash. He's got to have cash somewhere." They were robbing me. My ex-wife and her broke boyfriend had broken into my house to steal whatever they could find, but I was ready for them. Over the past month, I'd installed a backup security system that ran on battery power, completely separate from the main electrical system. Hidden cameras in every room, motion sensors, and most importantly, a panic room in the basement with its own communication system. I activated the backup system with my phone, and suddenly the house was flooded with light and the sound of alarms. Marta and Jake froze like deer in headlights. "Attention burglars," I announced over the house's intercom system from my study. "You are being recorded. The police have been called. I suggest you leave immediately." Instead of running, they came looking for me. "Alex!" Marta screamed, her voice echoing through the house. "We just want to talk." "With crowbars?" I replied, watching them on my phone's security app. Jake was indeed carrying a crowbar, probably the same one he'd used to break my kitchen window. They found me in the study, and for a moment we all stood there staring at each other like actors who'd forgotten their lines. Marta looked terrible. She'd lost weight, her hair was stringy and unwashed, and her clothes looked like she'd been sleeping in them. Jake wasn't much better. Hollow-eyed, unshaven, wearing a dirty jacket that had seen better decades. "We need money," Marta said simply. "Just enough to get back on our feet. You owe me that much." "I owe you nothing. You got exactly what you deserved." "What I deserved?" Her voice rose to a shriek. "I gave you 15 years of my life. You gave me 15 years of lies. There's a difference." Jake stepped forward, raising the crowbar. "Just tell us where you keep the cash, and we'll leave." "There is no cash, Jake. I'm not stupid enough to keep large amounts of money in the house." "Then write us a check." "No." That's when Jake snapped. He swung the crowbar at my desk, sending papers and my computer monitor flying. Marta started screaming, whether at him or me, I couldn't tell. "You destroyed our lives," she yelled. "We had nothing left, nothing." "You destroyed your own lives. I just made sure everyone knew about it." Jake raised the crowbar again, this time aiming at me, but I was ready. I'd been planning for this moment since the day I found that hotel receipt. I pressed a button on my phone, and suddenly the study door slammed shut and locked automatically. Steel security shutters dropped down over the windows. The three of us were trapped in a reinforced room with no way out. "What the hell?" Jake spun around, pulling at the door handle. "Welcome to my panic room," I said calmly. Steel-reinforced walls, bulletproof windows, independent air supply, and most importantly, live streaming capability. I held up my phone, showing them the screen. We were broadcasting live to Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube simultaneously. The viewer count was already climbing. "Say hello to the internet, Marta. Tell them why you're in my house at midnight with a crowbar." "You bastard!" She lunged at me, but Jake grabbed her arm. "This is kidnapping," he shouted. "You can't keep us here." "Actually, I can. You broke into my house. You're armed. I'm defending myself. The police should be here in about 10 minutes, and until then, we're all going to have a nice chat with my online audience." The viewer count hit 500, then 1,000. Comments were pouring in from people I knew, colleagues, neighbors, former friends of Marta's. "Tell them about the affair, Marta," I said, adjusting the camera angle to get both of them in frame. "Tell them about the hotel receipts and the group chat where you laughed about your boring husband." "Stop it," she whispered, but her voice was being picked up clearly by the room's microphones. "Tell them about how you tried to steal our money to run away with your broke boyfriend." I said, "Stop it." But I was just getting started. For months, they'd controlled the narrative, making me look like the bad guy, the boring husband who couldn't satisfy his wife. Now it was my turn. "Jake, tell everyone how you bragged about sleeping with another man's wife. Tell them about living in that studio apartment and lying about your income." Jake was pulling frantically at the door, the crowbar forgotten on the floor. "Ah, let us out, you psycho." "Oh, I'm the psycho. You're the ones who broke into my house with weapons." The viewer count hit 3,000. I could see comments from people I hadn't talked to in years, all of them expressing shock and disgust at what they were witnessing. Then Marta broke. "Fine," she screamed at the camera. "You want the truth? I cheated on him because he was boring, because he cared more about spreadsheets than me, because Jake made me feel alive for the first time in years." "There we go," I said, "the truth at last. And yes, we took money from the joint account. It was my money, too. I earned it." "Actually, you didn't," the prenup clearly states. "Screw the prenup." She was completely hysterical now, mascara running down her face, hair wild. "I gave you the best years of my life, and you gave me nothing but boredom and criticism." Jake tried to calm her down, but she was beyond reason. "And Jake's not broke. He's just between opportunities. We were going to start over somewhere new, somewhere people didn't know us. With my money. With our money." The viewer count hit 5,000. The comments were brutal. calling Marta everything from a gold digger to a sociopath. Jake was trying to hide his face from the camera, but there was nowhere to go in the small room. Then we heard sirens. "Sounds like the police are here," I announced to my online audience. Time to wrap up our little reunion. I pressed another button on my phone, and the door unlocked with a loud click. Jake immediately ran for it, but the house was surrounded. Marta stood there for a moment, staring at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over," she said. "Yes, it is." The police found Jake trying to climb out a bathroom window and Marta sitting in my kitchen, crying. The crowbar, the broken window, and the live-streamed confession made for an open and shut case of breaking and entering. As they led her away in handcuffs, Marta looked back at me one last time. "I hope you're happy," she said. "I'm getting there." The live stream ended with over 10,000 viewers and hundreds of comments supporting me. The video went viral overnight, reaching hundreds of thousands of people across social media platforms. By morning, the story had been picked up by local news stations. "Divorced man live streams ex-wife's break-in" was trending on Twitter. Marta and Jake were both charged with breaking and entering, attempted burglary, and destruction of property. Jake's crowbar made it a felony. I stood on my front porch the next morning, coffee in hand, watching the news trucks pack up and leave. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, waved from her garden. "Exciting night," she called out. "Not really," I replied, "just taking out the trash." 6 months later, I got a letter from Marta in county jail. She'd been sentenced to 18 months for the break-in plus probation. Jake got 2 years because of the weapon and his previous assault charge from the office incident. The letter was 3 pages of self-pity and blame, ending with a request for money for her commissary account. I threw it away without finishing it. My divorce was final, my house was secure, and my reputation was intact. Better than intact, actually. The story of how I'd outsmarted my cheating wife and her broke boyfriend had made me something of a local legend. Dave Millant promoted me to CFO. My dating life improved dramatically once word got out that I was single and had handled my divorce with such style. Last week, I ran into Dolores at the grocery store. Marta's mother looked older, more fragile than I remembered. "How are you doing, Alex?" "Very well, thank you. And you?" She sighed. "I visit her once a month. She keeps asking me to ask you for money." "What do you tell her?" "I tell her that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt." Smart woman. Too bad her daughter didn't inherit her wisdom. As I drove home that evening, past the country club where Marta and I had celebrated our engagement 15 years ago, I thought about that night when she'd joked about marrying me for money. Maybe she had married me for money. Maybe I'd been the boring husband she claimed I was. But in the end, I'd proven I was anything but boring. I'd proven I was dangerous, not with violence or threats, but with something far more powerful. The truth, perfectly timed and strategically deployed. Marta had underestimated me for 15 years, assuming I was too boring, too weak, too comfortable to fight back when she betrayed me. She was wrong. I pulled into my driveway, looked up at my house, not ours, and smiled. Sometimes the boring guy wins.